So number 10, we've got Scarlet Witch. Now, okay, yes, I know some of you guys out there in the real world, you're gonna defend her and you're gonna say, hey, I know her powers, it's great, that's fantastic. So let's get a little bit of a backstory here. So the first time we saw her was in 1964 in X-Men number 4. She had many appearances in comics over the years, and actually when she first appeared, her first real big problem was that she didn't have really defined powers. That's right. Her powers initially were called hex powers, and she could just basically do anything and could cause random events to just happen. She pretty much was a wild card for any tough plot points that the writers had. So some things that she would do is, cause Ultron to short circuit randomly and even cause gas mains to just explode, and it wasn't until Kurt Busiek decided that her powers would be all about manipulating chaos. That's when we got a better picture. But however, that didn't really sit well, because by the time we got to the Avengers Disassembled series, she pretty much had the ability to warp reality. However, most people identify her as having chaos magic being used to her advantage. What is chaos magic? Well, your guess is as good as mine. Number 9, we got Miss Marvel, or Carol Danvers, appearing in 1968. Now, in the past, she has had so many problems. As a matter of fact, today she still has a lot. As a matter of fact, most people identify her as Marvel's version of Superman. Pretty much the female version of that. She's got super strength, stamina, all that sort of stuff. She can fly. Being half human and half Kree gives her a bunch of different abilities, and when she could fly back in the day, the only way she could do it was through a belt device. She also could tap into the energy of a white hole, which is a reverse black hole, which, by the way, has never been identified by man at all in history. This allowed her to control things like gravity, heat, and many other aspects of different spectrums. This also allowed her to survive in the vacuum of space, and she can fly 6 times the speed of sound, and yes, she can explode energy out of her hands, fingertips, all that sort of stuff. And apparently she also has the ability of 7th sense. Number 8, you got Hercules. Kind of an old sort of guy, you know what I mean? Debuting in Avengers number 10, 1964. Now, he was originally simply a minion of Immortus, and he belongs to the Olympian species. Like most, just like Hercules himself, he's got super strength, speed, and stamina. Known to be the strongest of all the Olympians, he could actually apparently pick up a sequoia tree, smash it to bits. It's also originally believed that he even moved the island of Manhattan. However, that was a little too much for comic book writers, and they were pretty much like, nah, he was just bluffing, he was just saying, tune the talk, you know what I mean? It wasn't true at all. Ooh. On top of that, he can go 100 miles per hour and go toe to toe with Thor, and can withstand, the impacts from bullets. He's kind of another Superman if you really think about it, but his mace itself is kind of like the mace version of Thor's hammer. Thing is, he's backed up by Olympian magic, so nothing like even diseases can hurt him. However, if Zeus takes away his powers, he's pretty much useless. It'd be interesting to see what would happen if Rogue touched him. Number 7, you got Black Knight, or Dane Whitman. Now, an older Avenger dating back to around 1967. He's actually the descendant of the original Black Knight comics. He gets his powers mainly from his magic sword. He became the Black Knight after he got his famous winged horse Aragorn. Now, he joined the Avengers to defeat Kang the Conqueror originally. He didn't really have any superpowers to begin with. This all changed, however, after he bonded with his teammate Sersi. This was after she was injured and his fellow Eternal named Icarus attempted to stabilize her by merging the two together. He's apparently a good swordsman and can hold up against Captain America, and he's a bit of a scientist, understands genetic engineering. His powers might not be a mystery, but he definitely is. Number 6, we got Vision. Okay, yeah, we've all seen him. We all know basically he is a robot. Some people identify him more or less as a human being, but is made out of, synthetic materials. Okay. Now, what's different about him from the movies is in the comics, he's got a solar jewel on top which absorbs solar energy, which can actually also discharge energy at any time. He also can fire beams of microwaves and infrared radiation. Very helpful to know. On top of that, he can also become extremely massive. This is confusing because apparently he does this by harnessing the power from some unknown dimension. This also makes him change in density. Being an android means he has super strength and all the other great attributes that other heroes have. As of recent comics, he can also split himself into smaller parts and change shape, but that's good old-fashioned nanotechnology at its best. Number 5, we got Mantis, probably my least favorite hero that I've ever seen brought to the screen. She's been around since 1973, so you gotta give her some credit there. Her origin, though, is completely unknown. Literally, she talks about herself in third person, and she says this one came from a place she must not name to reach a place no man must know. So I guess, you know, you don't really know where she's from. She also trained in martial arts, boom bam, that's good, and she apparently can even, or at least almost beat Captain America. Her biggest and strongest power is obviously using psychic empathy, which means she can feel other people's emotions, man. Basically, she's Deanna Troi from Star Trek. This allows her to figure out also a person's weak spot where she can immediately, boom, knock them out. She's apparently really strong, and with that, she's never ever, well, only once has she ever lost in a hand-to-hand combat situation. On top of that, she has the ability to meditate and heal herself. In some series, she can even sense the future. Number 4, we got Star Fox, and I'm not talking about the good Star Fox. I'm talking about this Star Fox from Marvel. Part of the Eternals group, he appeared first in 1973. Basically, he ages really slowly because he uses cosmic energy. This also makes him extremely hard to hurt because the energy protects him from falls and impacts and other things like that. However, bullets and knives can hurt him, and not just emotionally. However, Star Fox in some series has been able to manipulate gravity using psychokinesis. He also knows apparently 500 alien languages. But his most important power of all is he is capable of activating the pleasure area of enemies' brains, which pretty much helps them calm down so he can win the battle. So I guess you could say, sexiness is his power. Yeah. Number 3, we've got Moonlight, that appeared in Werewolf by Night number 32. That was hard to say. 1975. Mark Spector is his alter ego. He is human. He's got a lot of similarities between him and Batman. Started off as a boxer, you know, a costumed hero. However, he got his superpowers after he visited an Egyptian moon god. And yes, that means he gets a certain amount of strength depending on the phase of the moon. Apparently, at one point he even lost his powers because he was disobedient. Yo, you bad Moonlight. You said and now you're done. I don't know what that means. It's also been said that Moonlight has multiple personalities which make him immune to psychic attacks. He also uses what is known as carbondanium armor, which, yes, is not a real armor. This allows him to lock joints and so he can lift more. On top of that, he can jump out of his armor and use it to hold buildings from falling over, which he's done in the past, and then he's fought villains in his underwear. Oh yeah. Does not fly anywhere. He has the Mooncopter, kind of like the Bat plane. I don't know why Marvel has not got sued for that. Number 2, you got Noh-Varr, a rather new superhero debuting in the year 2000 for Marvel Boy number 1. Now he is part Kree, part cockroach. That's right. He's also a part of the Dark Avengers. Now because he is half Kree and he has insect DNA, he's got a lot of strength, agility, stamina, that sort of thing. Not as appealing as Spider-Man though. Nobody really wants to hang out with a cockroach. What his power is he can also control his neurological impulses, so he can remove himself from feeling any sort of pain. He can also suppress his emotions, which can hinder him from winning a battle. This is simply known as Whiterun, where he removes anything from his thoughts. So basically that cute girl that's in the red dress while he's fighting Thanos, that girl ain't getting hit on at all. Also, Noh-Varr's salvia can infect people. I mean, like, he's a bug. You know, he can scale walls and get into small places because he's triple jointed. And yes, like a bug, he can digest almost anything, which can repair himself. And like most superheroes, he knows science pretty well, which for this guy, you know, he helped develop interdimensional travel. I don't know how you do that. But number 1, probably the worst of them all, is 3D Man. Oh god. Debuted in 1977 and should have stayed there. Basically the story is Chuck Chandler was captured by the Skrull invaders and he got turned into a 2-dimensional being. However, his brother Hal ended up putting on these glasses and could see his brother, and if he concentrated hard enough, boom, Chuck materialized into a 3-dimensional weird being. Basically done obviously through the advancement of radiation, of course. But the thing is, apparently when Hal puts on the glasses, it renders him unconscious, and of course, 3D Man goes to fight the world. 3D Man also has superhero strength, and you know what? I'm just done. That has got to be the most ridiculous one of them all. That's the icing on the cake.
Number 10. Phage. Phage first appeared in Venom Lethal Protector number 4, which was a 6-issue miniseries from 1993, but he wasn't named until 2012 in Carnage USA number 2. Phage is one of 5 symbiotes forcefully bred out of Venom. The siblings are Agony, Riot, Lasher, and Scream. The Phage would later combine with 3 of its siblings, Riot, Lasher, and Agony, to form the better known Hybrid symbiote. So from then on, we're dealing with Hybrid and Hybrid's bondings. This all came about because of the success of the first Venom offspring, Carnage, and while people always want to repeat success. However, few of the symbiote offshoots have proved as popular or long-lasting as Carnage. Carnage first debuted in The Amazing Spider-Man number 361 in 1992. That was as a full appearance. Like Venom before him, he had had a cameo appearance the issue prior. And also like Venom before him, his host, Cletus Cassidy, had been pre-established. All factors on top of his design and absolute bloodlust that made him much more memorable of a character than Phage to most. Still, Marvel has been riding the more and more symbiotes ride ever since, and just look at what they've got Kate's doing with Absolute Carnage. Number 9. Ruin Venom. Runes, depends how you want to say it. This symbiote comes to us from Ruin vs. Venom number 1 in 1995, and has direct connection to Planet of the Symbiotes, which was a 5-issue event from 1995, and actually had to do with the fallout over the creation of the 5 forcefully bred symbiotes we just talked about. Also, the planet in question is Earth, don't get excited. Ruins is a murder mystery, which I'm about to ruin, so heads up. Ruin Venom involves a symbiote that survived the seeming death of all invading symbiotes from the planet arc, and bonds to Ruin. So, who is Ruin? Well, Ruin was an extreme vampire-like creature created in the 90s who debuted in Sludge number 1. He begins framing Venom for murders around town by writing Venom in huge letters next to the victim. Copying Carnage much? Of course the media falls for it. However, Ruin Venom runs into some problems, not only when real Venom comes to investigate, but also when Ruin begins to suspect some of his actions are being influenced. Ruin. Number 8. Kroba. Kroba first debuted in Venom Seed of Darkness number 1 in 1997. Are you picking up on just how much Venom stuff was going on in the 90s? There was no escape. If you didn't like Venom, Godspeed. Side note, Kroba's heading on the cover is The Living Darkness, and inside the book, he's called The Abyss That Walked. Pretty neat. So this is supposed to be a story that occurs before the current timeline, well, the then current timeline. Marvel will do this sometimes when they have a tale that really won't slot anywhere but isn't strong enough for a what if, or they're going through a period where they're not publishing what ifs. It's a pretty simple story. Kroba bonds with a scientist, Dr. Don Levy. It tells him that it will help maintain knowledge, the usual, but it tricks him. It's up to Eddie Brock to defeat him. I'm kidding, Eddie isn't Venom. In this story, he's still a not as good as Peter Parker photographer, so he observes and ponders on the nature of man and monster. This one is less hard to understand and more easy to miss. Number 7. ZZZXX. Yes, I said Z. It's Canada up here. This is a more recent addition who debuted in X-Men Kingbreaker number 2 in 2009. This symbiote is a Clintar and a mutant, and it eats brains. It was discovered by the Shi'ar. The most interesting thing about this symbiote, aside from its rather random letter-centric name, is how it was weaponized against the Charles Xavier from the Cancerverse, which was a realm introduced in the Realm of Kings crossover comic 2010, a universe ruled by evil organic masses. So the Xavier in this universe was a planet-sized brain, and for a brain eater like ZZZXX, a match made in heaven. This could really have hit the zombie element harder with the symbiote, but I mean, they have Marvel Zombies for that. Number 6. Mania. Mania first debuted in Venom number 1 in 2003. This symbiote is a clone of Venom, which given Marvel's history with dragging out perfectly good clone sagas until the entire creative staff behind them is permanently traumatized, I'm amazed a direct clone like this hadn't happened sooner. Also, it was only named Mania in 2011 when Venom relaunched. So this clone was created using a piece of Venom's tongue, which is hardly surprising. That tongue is everywhere. From the start, the symbiote was sadistic, refusing to bond with offered hosts, instead torturing and killing them, sometimes by pulling up the worst fears from their memories and then acting on those. The thing with Mania is that it's hard to track, because a bunch of things that happen, such as it being reabsorbed into Eddie's symbiote, into Eddie's symbiote are no longer considered canon. Now Mania is just kind of around and brought out when necessary, but since Kate's and the ridiculous amount of symbiotes he's been creating, we'll see how some of these other symbiotes fare. Number 5. Endosym Armor. This first debuted in the Superior Iron Man #1 in 2014. So in 2014, Marvel had an event called Axis, which many do not remember too fondly. Cliff notes: Avengers and X-Men versus the Red Skull controlling Xavier and Onslaught. After all of this, Tony's personality was flipped, so now he was Dark Tony. And so he created the Armor Mark 50, a smart liquid metal mesh incorporating symbiote elements. What could go wrong? Also, I can't hear liquid metal without thinking about Terminator 2. It's actually kinda sad. This was a mindless artificial symbiote that was entirely controlled via artificial intelligence, and then cast aside when Tony's personality flipped back. Superior Iron Man was an interesting time. 100% it just existed because of how well Superior Spider-Man had done, but you know, that one had stakes. Shots fired, I'm sorry. I actually have a soft spot for the aesthetic of this armor. Number 4. Magic Venom. Getting real recent now. Magic Venom debuted in Venom Volume 4 number 13 in 2019, and has ties to the War of the Realms event. The one that people on the outside like to make fun of because the lead villain is Malekith, the dark elf from Thor 2 The Dark World. Well, he was from elsewhere first, but that's where many know him from now. And there's been this odd campaign to make Thor 2 relevant again. It's been very interesting. War of the Realms actually starts with him already having conquered all the other realms, so you're stuck in the lamest one. This one, Midgard, Earth. Again, I live here. Give me Alfheim or Valheim, somewhere else. Anyways, everyone has to band together and stop him. In this arc, Eddie and Venom are separated, so he is given a Dream Stone by a dark elf who is hoping to recruit him. The Dream Stone acts as an artificial symbiote, but is a mindless one, and Eddie ultimately uses pieces of the suit to save civilians. Number 3. Spider-Man India. So Spider-Man India was a miniseries that lasted 4 issues in between 2004 and 5, and blended elements of Spider-Man mythos with more mythological elements. The concept was conceived by an Indian director who had met with Stan Lee to discuss creating an Indian superhero. Symbiotes in this universe are demons, fanged, tusked demons who once ruled but were captured in an amulet. When the amulet was found, it turned the host into the Green Goblin. The demon would hop from the Green Goblin to Spider-Man, but be expelled, but before this it is called Venom. The amulet is destroyed, but not Venom. He's always a menace, no matter the Earth. Number 2. The Beyonder. For this version, we have to go to yet another one of Marvel's humor issues. These issues have brought us such gems as What If Black Panther Was White? Now I give you The Beyonder. Just let the pun wash over you. Live in it. Be the pun. This comes to us from the What the ? A self-parodying comic series for silly jokes. Its tagline was, the Marvel Mag of Mirth and Mayhem. The Beyonder is this universe's version of the Beyonder, who gives Spider-Ham a version of the black uniform. But it's not a symbiote. I just want to tell you about the Beyonder. It's fun to say for me, but it's probably not fun for you to listen to. Number 1. Scorn. Scorn first debuted in Carnage number 5 in 2011. So Scorn was created out of a piece of Carnage left in space after Carnage was torn in half by the Sentry, but he got better. The Sentry may be one of the most powerful beings out there, but Carnage has plot armor and sells comics, so take that, Sentry. The pieces are collected to attempt to create prosthetic limbs, so the first thing that the symbiote bonds to is a prosthetic arm. Because of this, Scorn can bond to technology. Now this is an element that some find confusing, and also there are other story elements that make Scorn a bit convoluted. Things like how Cassidy was alive and had been preserved by Carnage and was repaired by these prosthetics. Again, you can't kill Carnage. Scorn was eventually corrupted by Null, the symbiote god, and started a cult to worship him. She was killed by Carnage after offering herself to him. Absolute carnage. There is so much carnage going on right now. Number 10. Nazis raise milk prices. This comes to us from 1942, so get ready, full steam propaganda ahead. All the heroes who were around at this time period were fighting Nazis, and Wonder Woman was no exception. But they still wanted there to be comic book plots, like this one from Sensation Comics number 7. In this tale, Diana notices that the price of milk is soaring, and she's on the case. She goes to speak to the head of International Milk Co., but he's dismissive. Long story short, they're secret Nazis, and they're raising the price of milk to make it inaccessible for American youth, so that they will have weak, brittle bones and not be able to fight. Playing the long game. They also try to drown her in milk, but she changes in the milk, escapes, and ultimately ensures the safety of good affordable milk prices. That's the kind of out-of-the-box thinking you could expect from the Golden Age villains. Kept you on your toes. Number 9. Ra's al Ghul pretends to be Talia to get Bruce Wayne's body. This is going to take us over to Batman Beyond, and is largely on here because I want to talk about this show and this fantastic episode. This plot comes to us from the episode Out of the Past, and deals with Bruce's sadness about aging and how he feels the best years of his life and his great loves are behind him. When lo and behold, Talia appears, offering him the chance to rejuvenate in the Lazarus Pit, thusly leaving Gotham to Terry and come and finally live their life together. Also, this is all pre-Damian, so she hasn't raped him in this continuity. That's how Damian was conceived. Fast facts. Bruce starts to take her up on it, but as you can imagine, it's too good to be true. And after sharing a kiss, and maybe more, it's revealed that Talia isn't Talia at all. It's Ra's, who has overwritten Talia, taking control of her body. This is all part of a long quest because he wants Bruce's body to rejuvenate it, transfer his consciousness into it, and pretend to be his long-lost heir, continuing his plans with Bruce Wayne's resources. Here's the thing, he didn't have to do this with Bruce. He could have picked any old rich Joe Schmo with no legitimate heirs and tempted them with youth. This was just creepy, and leads me to wonder about his true feelings for Bruce. Great episode, good series, watch it, that is all. And look, I didn't go off on my usual DCAU tangent, which this series is a part of. Number 8, we have to take a look at a movie now. We've got Captain America, the really cheesy one from 1990. The movie that gave us a Steve Rogers who steals vans by pretending to be carsick. In this film, the Red Skull is really against the president's pro-environmental campaign, and decides that really there's only one thing to do, and that's kidnap and brainwash him. This is instead of assassinating him, which was an option, but the kidnap brainwash plan is just so much more fun. The Red Skull needs a challenge. There's also nukes involved, but this brainwashing plot was the crux of it. This plan is weak, and if the Red Skull were real, I'm sure he'd sue for slander, cause he'd never come up with such a played out plan. At least not in the 90s. Maybe in the days of the great milk price hike though. It was a joke, I know they're from different companies. Lower your pitchforks. Number 7, last movie for now, I promise. Then we're on to the full comic book zaniness, but we have to talk about Catwoman, the Halle Berry one. People often get caught up in the Halle Berry as Catwoman, or the terrible CG, or the costume trying so hard to be sexy it does a 180 and just becomes sad. But what is often skipped over is the plot. So this film involves an evil cosmetics company whose product will eventually destroy the faces of the women who use it, while also hardening them into stone. This is actually a classic story. We've been here before. However, when you make it the focal point of a 2004 movie, people start to poke holes in it. Lauren Hadari, played by Sharon Stone, is the wife of the CEO of the beauty company, and she just becomes obsessed. She kills patients. Halle Berry is not playing Selena Kyle in this movie. She kills her own husband and goes to great lengths to keep this a secret. They need to release this product and keep it going. However, here's the thing. This is an untenable plan. People are going to use this product and then the word will get out. Are you going to kill every single person who uses it? No. So essentially the fight is Catwoman trying to stop people from having to file a civil suit, a class action lawsuit actually. This movie is actually really fun if you accept it on its own terms. It's not good, but that doesn't mean you can't have a good time. Number 6, Scarecrow makes everyone illiterate. So the DCAU, that being the DC Animated Universe, had a series of tie-in Batman comics, 2 series actually, and this plot comes from those pages. And it takes the heroes a while to figure out that it's actually a Scarecrow plot, because in all fairness, it doesn't match his usual MO, at least not until you really think about it. So in this story, nobody can read anything anymore. They can't read signs, books, nothing, and society just instantly collapses. Train conductors can't run trains, people can't follow road signs, pandemonium. The thing with this plan is that it takes a very loose look at illiteracy, like people can't understand symbols of any kind or things that were color-coded. Nothing. It's just a bit of a stretch. They can't even take money out of an ATM. All they're seeing is bizarre symbols. People are dying. They call it the illiteracy disease. This story was 2 parts. On the second cover it has Robin cowering in fear of road signs. The thing with this one is, well, it's just not accurately labeled. It makes for a fun story, but you really have to suspend your disbelief, which I'm 100% willing to do. Way to go outside the box, Scarecrow. That's good thinking. Number 5, Identity Crisis. Identity Crisis is one of those stories that was really well received when it was released, but people now look back on it with a bit of a jaded eye. Identity Crisis was released from June to December of 2004, and was written by famed thriller novelist Brad Meltzer, who wanted to create a thriller in the superhero format. The ramifications it had on characters and some of the mischaracterizations are still discussed to this day. But paradoxically, it was very solidly written. It just really needs to be taken on its own in a bubble, which thanks to 2 universe-wide shifts since, one can now do. So the villainess of this tale was Jean Loring, the former wife of the Atom, Ray Palmer, who set about terrorizing the loved ones of heroes so that she and the Atom would get back together because he'd be concerned about her safety. The only thing is, right out the gate, she accidentally killed the elongated man's wife, and then it was just a case of escalation escalation. Let me kill my friend so that my ex will get back with me. Or I could call him. This is why she ended up in Arkham, which was also a terrible idea. She knew identities, but Ray put her there anyway. Maybe they truly were meant to be. Number 4. Lex makes a robotic Lois Lane. So Lex is obsessed with Clark on many levels, some that he probably doesn't want to admit to himself. And he's always scheming something. Remember when Connor Kent, aka Con-El, was Lex and Clark's son before they retconned that? Well, I will always remember. The New 52? What's that? So in Action Comics number 890, we learned that Lex's assistant had made a Lois Lane robot, and while Lex was like, okay, thanks, I'll keep it. And he did, and he slept with her. It's just weird. This is just bizarre villainous behavior. It happened while plotting, really, but you need to know. I mean, he's creating clones of him and Clark's DNA. He's sleeping with a Lois Lane bot. There are things that need to be discussed here that probably never will be. All I'm gonna say is, Klex. Number 3. Doctor Doom vs. Office Supplies. This comic is from 2006, and its full title is Spider-Man and the Fantastic Four in Brain Drain, Teachers Count / Office Max Custom Comic number 1. This comic features Doctor Doom trying to drain the intelligence out of the children of the world. But really what this story is about is being sponsored by Office Max and featuring some actual teachers. This is a PSA comic, so a public service announcement. Its message is that teachers need to be paid more. How it delivers that message, well, basically it's trying to talk about how they have to contend with real world issues like having to buy their own office supplies, but then goes, thankfully there's Office Max, so they're super affordable, hint hint. And also they take on ignorance, such as Doctor Doom's brain drain machine. This comic does have some stellar moments though, such as the teachers throwing office supplies at Doom, and also Reed being impressed by the Office Max supply store. He's actually like, wow, look at all these supplies, rubber bands and a ball. Reed is impressed by many things, but a ball of rubber bands? Okay, sure Jan. Number 2. Magneto was Zorn all along. This arc and the retcon that had to be done afterwards are still confusing to people. So Zorn debuted in the new X-Men Annual number 1, and he existed, like he was real, only at some point he was replaced by Magneto, and no one noticed, because Magneto sorta mimicked the abilities that Zorn had, and he was masked. But then he was unmasked, and haha, with the help of Chinese supporters, it was Magneto the whole time, and he wasn't dead, and he did all this, pretended to be a teacher for months because he wanted to infiltrate the X-Men. So yeah, this was clearly a reveal to be a reveal, and then they had to retcon it away, and it doesn't even make sense how they did it. Just why? Unpopular opinion, I think this entire run by Grant Morrison is overrated. Leave your unpopular opinions down below. I can see them now. You're overrated. You move your hands too much. Number 1. Big Barda and Superman are kidnapped to make a porno. So for this we need to go back to Action Comics number 592, and in this story, poor Barda, who is just adjusting to her life on Earth, tries to stop a crime, only to end up in the sewers and kidnapped by a villain called the Sleaze, who lives up to his name and then some. He can control people's emotions and force them to do his bidding, and his plan at first is just to make her dance for him. But by happenstance, Superman ends up tracking Sleaze to the sewers, and then they both end up under his control, and his next plan is to take them to a pornographer to shoot an official porn movie for the money. The worst part, they're both fighting it the entire time, but can't. Thankfully, they're saved by Barda's husband, Mr. Miracle, and all they've done is kiss. Okay, this plan, it makes sense, it's just really gross and icky. It's not even a bad story, it just leaves you feeling like you need several showers. It's a super petty, weak plan. I mean, Sleaze, you were from Apocalypse, and this is the best you got? Actually, I'm kinda glad. If this was the B plan, I don't want to see the A plan. It's probably, like a superhero orgy or something.
In at number 10, Danielle Moonstar. Danielle Moonstar is a confusing character, period. She's an individual who has been through multiple iterations of aliases, to the point where it's almost comical. Danielle Danny Moonstar first appeared in the New Mutants in 1982, and is a Cheyenne superhero who is generally associated with the X-Men. She was initially codenamed Psyche and later became Mirage. And her abilities history is a long one. Let's start with her mutant powers. She was a former empath who lost her abilities to communicate with animals and create three-dimensional images of visual concept within her mind and the minds of others. Like I said, she lost that. Generally, she could manifest people's fears or desires as realistic illusions. She lost those powers on M-Day and then regained them after being infected with the transmute virus, but then was also cured of it by Dark Beast. See what I mean? It's already confusing. She briefly could make telepathic images manifest as psionic energy, allowing them to become tangible entities of solid psionic force, but that was limited. She would carry around a dream spear with her to destroy them when she was done with them. Unfortunately though, these powers would give her blinding headaches. Then, she became a Valkyrie, and was endowed with the Valkyrie power to perceive death. She would lose those powers though when Asgard fell, but then made a deal with Hela to get them back. And and in the past she was capable of manipulating quantum energy. Moving on to number 9, Black Hood. When you hear the name Black Hood, a couple of different things may pop into your mind. For starters, it's a name that likely elicits a pulp character, mysterious and criminal perhaps in nature, a vigilante maybe. Now for those of you immersed in pop culture sensations, you might think of the CW TV series Riverdale and its mildly absurd Black Hood serial killer storyline. If you don't watch Riverdale, yes, that's a thing. Well, the Black Hood comic character actually has relations to that latter association, since he was a creation of Archie Comics. First appearing in Top Notch Comics issue 9 in 1940, he became rather popular, getting his own title called Black Hood Comics in 1943, which was a pulp magazine that ran for 11 issues before it was retitled and shifted its focus to being an all-humor title. During his time under Archie Comics, he was merely a great fighter and detective, but after the character was revived by DC's Impact Comics imprint in 1991, he gained a different set of powers, magically increased physical abilities and awareness. So what does that even mean? Well, we'll get to that in a sec, because here's where it gets even more befuddling. Impact had 3 Black Hoods. The first was a bitter vigilante who was killed off in their first issue of Black Hood. The second was a high school student who took over the hood but then abandoned it. And then the third was a former mobster who killed the first Black Hood. Whenever somebody wore the hood, they would get heightened awareness and increased strength, speed, and agility. The real kicker though? The hood was believed to be cursed, with each individual who wore it eventually succumbing to death, and the hood finding its way into the hands of a new individual who had the potential to take up the helm. Moving on to 8, the Thunderer. The Thunderer is a character who was published by Timely Comics in the Golden Age, the predecessor of Marvel. He's a dude whose superpower was high impact voice amplification. In other words, dude shouted real loud. So let's backtrack here for a sec. Thunderer first appeared in 1941 in Daring Mystery Comics issue 7 and was a fellow named Jerry Carstairs, a radio operator frustrated that the US wasn't dealing with crime or Nazi saboteurs, so he took the law into his own hands. After learning of a Nazi infiltration operation that was abusing the radio station he worked at, he adopted the Thunderer persona, a costume with a built-in microphone, and took them down. He is capable of deafening people or leveling buildings with his sonic scream. Sure, you could call him a predecessor to Black Bolt's perhaps, on a creative level, but let's be real here. How exactly he was able to create a built-in microphone to do that in the 40s and level buildings is beyond me. Needless to say, he fell into obscurity, with one of his only claims to fame now being that he appeared in an animated Spider-Man series in an episode called 6 Forgotten Warriors. At least his costume looked kinda cool though, you gotta give him that. And at 7, Jazz. If you thought Thunderer was a character who had a silly power, get ready to wrap your mind around Jazz. No, not the music, but the character. Jazz, whose real name is John Xander, is a blue-skinned mutant who wanted to be a rapper, but was not good at it. He became a drug runner instead, selling toad juice, which was a drug made from the secretions of another mutant. Gross. After M-Day, he was one of the few who retained his powers, and later, while trying to buy drugs, he was killed by Johnny D via a miniature voodoo doll. Needless to say, dude has a bit of a mockable storyline. So why is he confusing? Because he's a low-level mutant who doesn't actually have an ability. His mutation is that his skin is blue. That's it. I mean, maybe he could rap you to death with his mediocrity, but technically that is not a superpower. That's just a depressing character trait. And at 6, Kylun. There are plenty of animal-themed superheroes out there in the world of comics. Generally, their powers derive from their animal persona, as if they were some sort of anthropomorphic creature who had the abilities of said creature. We're not talking furries here, friends. Don't you dare make that joke in the comments. For example, take a look at Beast. Even Wolverine has similarities to his alias's namesake. But then there is Kylun, who is slightly misleading. Sure, he looks like a cat creature of sorts, feline in nature, but that has no relation to his abilities. He's got claws and fangs which he can use in battle, but his true power is something unrelated. He can mimic sounds. Literally any sound that he hears, Kylun, aka Colin McKay, can replicate it thanks to his superpowered vocal cords. You weren't expecting that, were you? And at 5, Metamorpho. Metamorpho is a head scratcher. Also known as the Element Man, Metamorpho is a DC character who helped found the Outsiders, and first appeared in 1965 in the Brave and the Bold issue 57. He was a product of the popularity of Fantastic Powers, a successor to Doom Patrol and Metal Men, and his abilities consisted of elemental shapeshifting, super strength, and invulnerability. While those last two are pretty straightforward, it's the shapeshifting that we're concerned with. When you think elemental, You think fire, earth, water, air, right? Well, Metamorpho is more complex than that, which often causes confusion surrounding the character. He can transmute his body into a variety of elemental compounds that he can then form to his will. In other words, he is a much more science-based hero. Now initially he was restricted to elements that naturally occur within the human body, but over time that became less and less of a limitation, with writers allowing him to assume forms of gas, liquids, or solid states. He can alter the shapes and consistencies of these elements to form complex compounds, and can shape parts and portions of his body rather than being forced to change it in its entirety. He is capable of forming himself into complex structures the likes of tanks and a bicycle, or more ambiguous stuff like a cloud. Moving on to number 4, Super Teen. On one of our previous lists we mentioned Pureheart, the superhero version of Archie's comics namesake, Archie Andrews. He is a superhero who is pure of heart, if his name didn't give that away. And what exactly he is capable of is questionable at best. As long as he remains pure of heart, he has superpowers. You guys should probably go watch part 3 of this list if you're curious. Now for those of you who already have, at this number we have one of his companions, the superhero version of Betty Cooper, who comes to be when Betty twists her magical ponytail. Actually, her powers are supposed to be similar to Pureheart's, which, yes, just makes her more confusing. She has been described as a hero who can, I quote, do just about anything with her snappy looking costume and jet belt. So we know she can fly, we know she has super strength, we know that she is super durable, and we know her powers come to be when she witnesses someone's life in danger. For example, Archie about to get hit by a truck, Archie about to fall off a ledge, Archie about to hurt himself in pretty much any way possible, because apparently he is super klutzy. Or at least he is when Super Teen's around. But aside from that, she just tends to be a bit vague in her portrayals, hence her inclusion on this list. And just baffling conceptually in general. It's like Archie Comics is like, let's make our characters into superheroes. That's a great idea, and it just didn't really work out. And at 3, Extrano. Extrano is a character who didn't receive the best of treatment in his early years. A DC character, Extrano first appeared in Millennium issue 2 in 1988 and is a superhero magician, although many might remember him for what he's generally mocked for. A magical gay character who was attacked by an AIDS vampire called Hemogoblin that then made him HIV positive. You can't make this up. Needless to say, the portrayal was not a great one, especially for the queer community in a time when there was plenty of misconceptions about AIDS. He was a character who was selected by the Guardians of the Universe to take part in an experiment in human evolution, which made him into a powerful magician, whose sorcery abilities were never really fully elaborated upon. He would dress in loose colorful garments, refer to himself as Auntie, and was pretty much coded as a homosexual character, who later would acquire a powerful skull crystal that made him more masculine, which was largely believed to be the result of negative comments from readers. His magic consisted of stage tricks, using ping pong balls to outwit his foes. He could levitate and fire blasts of energy from his hands, but not much of what he could do was explained in great detail. He was very much the token magician character. Now these days he's gotten a bit more of a makeover, although his abilities are still quite ambiguous. He appeared in DC Rebirth, working with Midnighter to locate Apollo's soul in hell. According to writer Steve Orlando, who himself is bisexual, I quote, with a book like Midnighter and Apollo, which from cover to cover is a love letter to queer characters and our struggle to live, be visible and loved, it felt right to return one of the first and reintroduce him to a new generation. Maybe there's hope for Extrano after all. Up next at 2, Doorman. Doorman, aka Damar Davis, is a Marvel character who first appeared in West Coast Avengers Volume 2, Issue 46 in 1989, and was a member of the Great Lakes Avengers. He responded to Mr. Immortal's ad for Heroes for the Great Lakes team, who, on paper, can generate portals, and can fly via skis, which yes is weird. He is intangible and can also bring souls to the afterlife. It's a confusing set of skills, right? But here's where it gets more perplexing. His portal ability has a restriction. He can teleport people through walls, with his body serving as that portal, hence the name Doorman. Concerning the skis, he can summon them at will, although that doesn't make them any less confusing. If anything, his most useful talent is delivering souls to oblivion, but even then, he can only do it if that person is deceased, and he becomes only visible to that soul. It's like his creators didn't really think the portal ability was enough, so they decided to use the more mythical version of the Doorman, or Gatekeeper, and make him all about death, which, for the record, was a power of his added after the fact. And finally, in at number 1, Rainbow Girl. Ending off our list with an inherently sexist creation, we have Rainbow Girl. Rainbow Girl is an extraterrestrial character who first appeared in 1963 in DC's Adventure Comics issue 309. She is a metahuman who wields the power of the mysterious emotional spectrum, resulting in unpredictable mood swings. You can't make this up. It's like my mantra for this whole series. She would tap into colors that would result in different moods. Red being anger, blue being hope, green being willpower. She once also exhibited the ability to create a pheromone field that surrounded her in a giant rainbow and gave her an irresistible personality. Ugh. But here's where it gets utterly fascinating. Even DC doesn't know what the hell she can do. According to Geoff Johns, during the Blackest Night event, he noted that Rainbow Girl doesn't fully understand her powers and uses them more for fun. Just kill me now. Starting us off in at number 10, Crystal. Crystal is a character associated with a ton of different groups in the Marvel Universe. She is the Inhuman Princess, yet throughout her history she has appeared associated with different groups, the likes of the Fantastic Four, the Avengers, and to a lesser extent, the X-Men. She was exposed to the Terrigen Mist and gained psionic control over the elements of earth, fire, air, and water, and other natural materials by extension, which kind of makes her powers slightly confusing. All in all though, she is a character who has a whole lot going on, and has a history that is perplexing at best. She first appeared in Fantastic Four issue 45 in 1965, appearing alongside the Inhuman royal family. She fell hard for the Human Torch, Johnny Storm, and briefly joined the Fantastic Four team because of this. She was written out of the team though in Fantastic Four issue 105 after Jack Kirby departed from the title. Then she had a stint where she fell for Quicksilver, whom she had a daughter with named Luna. Then she rejoined the Fantastic Four, left again a year after that, and then in 1991 became an Avenger. Hope you guys are following. That stint lasted for a handful of years until 1998 when she returned to Attilan, making guest appearances in various stories for years to come. Eventually, in her timeline we hit the all-new, all-different Marvel, where she led her own team of Inhumans and got a brand new look which consisted of a pixie cut, and looked very different than her previous depictions. Overall, Crystal seems like she was birthed from a promising idea, but never really managed to find a place in the comics for decades, hence her constant flux throughout the Marvel Universe. Up next at 9, Rainbow Girl. Rainbow Girl lands on this list thanks to her very confusing powers. We've actually discussed the character on our series of superpowers no one understands, which you should definitely check out in case you haven't already. Rainbow Girl is an extraterrestrial character from the planet of Zolnar. A metahuman, her abilities consist of wielding the powers of the mysterious emotional spectrum, resulting in unpredictable mood swings. In other words, she is an inherently sexist character. But it gets worse. So her real shtick is that she taps into different colors that result in different emotions. Red is anger, blue is hope, green is willpower, which also is a little bit baffling. But she can also create a pheromone field around herself that looks like a rainbow. It gives her an irresistible personality to everyone, because it's not just looks that matter, it's personality too, right? Right? Jeez, God, DC, could you be any more on the nose? Here's the kicker though. How do these powers work? Well, it turns out even Rainbow Girl has zero clue. According to Geoff Johns, she doesn't fully understand her powers, but rather, she uses them more so for fun. In at number 8, Nebula. Similar to some of the characters we discussed on part 1 of this list, Nebula can often be considered befuddling due to the differences between her comic iteration and her MCU adaptation. Nebula in the MCU is Thanos' adoptive daughter, who suffered from the Mad Titan's onslaught of biomodifications. The version in the comics though is his granddaughter, a fact that Thanos initially refused to accept as truth and led to the tyrant severely abusing her during the Infinity Gauntlet storyline. Thanos tortured her by having her constantly on the brink of death, never dying but barely living, which Thanos would boast to be his greatest creation. After he had all but won and defeated those who opposed him after his now famous snap that wiped out half of all living things, she would take advantage of the fact that he had expanded his consciousness into the universe, and therefore left his body in a comatose state. So what'd she do? She took the gauntlet from him, and restored herself to her full health, and banished him. Then she decided to use it to try to conquer the universe, which, thanks to her inexperience with it, was a plan that was thwarted by Adam Warlock and company. A year later, she would be converted into a cyborg in the 3rd volume of the Silver Surfer comics, and would return much later in the Annihilation story event that made her fellow pals in the current iteration of the Guardians of the Galaxy popular, the same ones who would then be adapted into the MCU. Full circle! Up next at 7, Raven. DC's Raven is a character who helped revolutionize the Teen Titans, created by Marv Wolfman and George Perez back in 1980. She is a powerful empath who senses emotions and can control something called her soul self, which is essentially an astral body. She is capable of various kinds of magic and sorcery, and has become one of the most prominent members of the Titans over the years. But she's also got a demonic father named Trigon who causes her a whole lot of strife, and constantly thrusts her into narratives where she's turned evil thanks to his influence, hence the confusion around the character over the years. Remember that time she got hella weird and erotic with Starfire when she interrupted her wedding to Dick Grayson and then disintegrated the priest? Well, technically she interrupted the wedding by disintegrating the priest, but You guys know what I mean. There's a whole lot of that kind of stuff in the comics, but perhaps an even stranger moment in her history was after the New 52 reboot, when DC decided to put her in a Raven costume in which she was called Trigon's Blackbird of Terror. It seems as if Raven is a consistent character up until Trigon makes his frequent appearances in her life and then screws her up all over again, making it hard for readers to keep up. And at number 6, Gwenpool. Who is Gwenpool? Is she a female version of Deadpool? Is she Gwen Stacy as Deadpool? What's her deal? We want to know. Those are the questions that land her a spot on this list. Gwenpool, whose real name is Gwendolyn Poole, Poole spelled with an E at the end, is a character who originated as an amalgamation of Gwen Stacy and Deadpool on a variant cover of Deadpool's Secret Wars issue 2. This occurred thanks to the increasing popularity of Spider-Gwen at the time. Now eventually, seeing the popularity the character on the variant cover had, Marvel created 2 stories featuring her, one of which was a backup story in a Howard the Duck comic. Here, a retcon occurred. Her name was revealed to be Gwenpool, and in her following solo series, it was revealed that she was a character who had come from another universe in which she was privy to the comic book characters and all of the heroes and villains of the Marvel Universe. She claims that she is from the real world, like our world. And unwilling to be an extra in these stories, after arriving in the Marvel Universe, she got her own costume made. The tailor misunderstood her request based off of her name, which he believed was misspelt, thinking that she wanted a costume similar to Deadpool's, thus creating her a Deadpool-esque outfit. Apparently, he also had a surplus of pink material, and Gwen had pink highlights in her hair, hence why he made it into a pink costume. So there you have it, friends. Gwenpool has no relation to Deadpool whatsoever, minus appearing on a variant cover. And also having someone mistaken her name. Up next in her number 5 spot, Rogue. Rogue may be one of the more prominent heroic members of the X-Men, but once upon a time she was a villain. Or at least debuted as such. After her mutant powers manifested, she was tracked down by Mystique, who at the time was dating the precognitive character Destiny, who had advised her to look for Rogue. Chris Claremont had initially intended to have Mystique be Rogue's real mother, FYI. Anywho, Rogue joined up with the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Over the years, the character has been in a slew of different romantic relationships that often left fans scratching their heads, mainly because they either occur on alternate Earths, but are talked about so much that fans confuse what's canon, or because all of a sudden Rogue can touch someone that she couldn't touch before and now they're knocking boots because of it. Case in point, Colossus. In X-Men issue 100, Rogue discovers that she can touch him, so naturally they make out, which leads to a relationship. This caused quite the stir since in the past, Colossus was actually affected by her powers. Now let's take a look at Age of Apocalypse. She was married to Magneto and had kids with him after ditching Gambit. People freaked out over it. In the main 616 universe, she was retconned to have been in a relationship with Sentry when it was revealed that he existed. In the 2013 Age of Ultron event, which had nothing to do with the MCU film, might I add, she was married to Havoc and they led the Morlocks. And you know what else is confusing about Rogue? The number of times she's absorbed a power that is so immense that it eventually gets retconned. It happened in House of M when she absorbed Geneviève's cosmic powers. Up next, number 4, Fire. Fire, aka Beatrice DaCosta, first appeared in Super Friends issue 25 back in 1979. She lands a spot on this list for 2 specific reasons. First off, why is she green if she is fire? Second, and arguably more confusing, is she a queer character or not? Let's start with the former. Back when she first appeared in the comics, we're talking pre-Crisis on Infinite Earths, she was known as Green Fury. Her powers of green pyrokinesis were birthed from Brazilian mysticism, hence why her flames are green. She has the ability to become a being purely composed of living green fire, which is different than the Human Torch, whose flames are fiery plasma, or rather an aura of fire, 2 different things. Post-Crisis, Beatrice's name was changed to Green Flame, which she then changed yet again to Fire after joining up with the Justice League International team. Now, let's discuss the latter point of befuddlement. She had some serious romantic tension with Ice Maiden, a character who replaced Ice, who was Fire's best pal and teammate on the Justice League after Ice was killed. Fire and Ice, get it, huh? Ice Maiden and her had an on and off again flirtation that seemed more like Beatrice was obsessed with Ice Maiden rather than it just being a reciprocated flirtation. There was also a whole series of panels in Justice League America issue 103 that queerbaited the crap out of the 2 of them, but then played it off as Ice Maiden just trying to give Beatrice ice back. Their story would carry on with them almost always getting intimate, one of them saying, "Is this what you want?" And then that want is just some sort of fake out queerbaiting. Eventually Ice Maiden would come out as bisexual, but Fire would remain lost in the ether of terrible queerbait. Moving on to number 3, Barbara Gordon. While DC's Barbara Gordon, aka Batgirl, doesn't seem like a perplexing character initially, there is one facet of her history that is arguably baffling. We're talking about how exactly the character lost her ability to walk, and how exactly she gained it back. Not only is that one of the most controversial aspects of her character, and one of the hot topics that arose during the start of the New 52 when she was revealed to have become mobile once again as Batgirl, But it also is something that can be a little confusing when you look at exactly how the whole situation unraveled. Barbara Gordon would become paralyzed from the waist down thanks to the actions of the Joker in The Killing Joke, a story that is technically not canon and occurs in an alternate universe, and makes Barbara a mere plot device. The story isn't about her, and her mutilation and assault is merely to advance Batman and Jim Gordon's stories and motivations. Writers Kim Yale and John Ostrander, after reading The Killing Joke, would end up working with DC to revive the character as disabled rather than have her fall into obscurity, thus creating the persona Oracle. The Killing Joke was written to not be canon and included some post-crisis characters that were no longer canon. Yet, it ended up becoming one of the most defining stories of Barbara's history, and since has been really wishy-washy in terms of not being canon and then becoming canon again. The whole thing, very confusing. But becoming Oracle did a lot of positive things for the character. She became more intelligent as writers relied on her other abilities that previously had been barely touched upon. Sure, she was a librarian, but often she was written as more of a stereotype, a woman who served a greater purpose to the male characters she supported narratively. It also provided representation as a handicapped character who was still out there fighting crime, making an impact as a superhero, which was really cool. Then, when she regained the ability to walk in the New 52, the character was said to have still suffered the events of The Killing Joke, something that remained canon despite being a story from an alternate universe originally. Barbara had undergone extreme physiotherapy and surgery, and her disability had only ailed her for 3 years rather than decades. All in all, it's a little hard to follow. Moving on to number 2, Emma Frost. Being a story. Emma Frost is a character who is known for using her sexuality to her advantage. While we're not going to get into the whole history behind her objectification in comics versus her ownership of and agency over that sexuality, that's a whole other number for a different list. What we will discuss is the nuances of her powers. For starters, Emma was once considered an Omega level mutant. That is no longer the case according to House of X issue 1, which left her out of the Omega count. Her powers mainly consist of 2 overarching abilities. She has immense telepathic powers and can transform her body into an organic diamond state that gives her enhanced strength and durability, but also suppresses her telepathy. This power manifested when Genosha was destroyed, and this form is self-sustaining, meaning she doesn't need food or water to survive in it. She is also numb to emotion, pain, and empathy while in this form. Now she has been both a villain and a hero, and has teamed up with the X-Men and led them once upon a time, but often is a confusing character in the sense that she's jumped back and forth with her allegiances over the years multiple times. And last but not least, and at number 1, Black Canary. Black Canary first appeared in 1947's Flash Comics issues 86, and is a cluster of confusion. In the Golden Age, the character had the alter ego of Dina Drake, who went by the alias of Black Canary and fought alongside her husband, Detective Larry Lance. She didn't have superpowers. Rather, she was more of a vigilante who often posed as a criminal in order to infiltrate gangs. Later on, she was given a superpower called the Canary Cry, which was a high-powered sonic scream capable of incapacitating the likes of Superman. Seems straightforward, right? Haha, time for things to get messy. After the Golden Age, like the rest of DC's Golden Age heroes, Black Canary and her husband Larry were regulated to Earth 2. But in 1969, Larry was killed, and Dina decided that she was going to move to Earth 1 in the aftermath, where she joins the Justice League and then gets it on with Green Arrow. Weird. This is when she develops the Canary Cry. In the Silver Age, Black Canary then became 2 separate entities, Dina Drake Lance and Dina Laurel Lance, the former being the mother of the latter. The younger Black Canary became the focus in the comics, and she was the one who retained the metahuman Canary Cry ability. By the time the New 52 rolled around, those 2 characters were amalgamated into one, known as Dina Drake. In addition to that, if that wasn't confusing enough, her CW adaptations are also perplexing. There's multiple iterations: Dina Laurel Lance, Sarah Lance, the White Canary, and Dina Drake, all portrayed by different actors.
Number 10, Johnny Storm and The Thing. For almost no reason whatsoever, these two have had a rivalry on and off in the comics. Why? No one really knows. Their fighting and arguing comes in the form of trading insults, with Grimm often threatening to kill Johnny. Jeez. The two prank each other and Johnny berates Grimm, calling him ugly, while Grimm calls Johnny stupid. The two have quite the rivalry. Granted, this most likely comes from a loving place, where they consider one another to be like brothers. But the strangest part is that despite all their fighting and bickering, they seem to have almost no fights between them when Johnny starts dating Grimm's ex, Alicia, while he is away. Strange feud indeed. Number 9, Wolverine and Cyclops. You may be thinking, but everyone understands this rivalry. Wolverine and Cyclops are just polar opposites. No wonder they fight so much. Sure, this is true, but it's not usually their differences that bring the duo to blows. It's their similarities. Namely that they are often both in love with the same woman. While their love for Jean Grey is as old as time, they even at one point fought over Emma Frost, which seems like it's a bit much. It seems like these two honestly just want to fight each other no matter what. Is it possible that they are not even jealous of the affections of the woman they're fighting over, but the affection that the woman receives from the other? Two dudes fighting as much as Summers and Logan makes you really want to know why. And if there is some tension to ship between them, I know I certainly would ship it. There's gotta be some love under all that hate. Number 8. Kitty Pryde and Emma Frost. For a team and family of mutants, the members of the X-Men sure fight a lot. Though Emma Frost was admittedly part of Magneto's Brotherhood of Mutants, and longtime enemy to the X-Men, so it is understandable of Kitty Pryde to be hesitant to trust her. But after Emma reformed, she didn't want to continue to not get along with Kitty. She actually was the first to extend the olive branch, offering Kitty a place at her school. Kitty, however, was still holding a grudge and refused. This led to Emma waging all-out war on Shadowcat, which seems kind of intense. I get that the two already had a hard time getting along, but someone not wanting to sign up for your school does not mean that you should all out aim to destroy them. Little overkill there, Emma. Number 7. Batman and the Green Lanterns. This is a long-standing rivalry that kind of makes sense when you consider Batman had to put up with the antics of Guy Gardner trying to steal command of the Justice League from him, and Hal Jordan, mooning him and all sorts of antics. But Batman's rivalry with the Green Lanterns superseded even just these two jerks. Batman even has a beef with John Stewart, one of my favorite Green Lanterns. Why? John Stewart comes at him for all the Green Lantern hate he spews, calling him out as a man who is just threatened by Hal Jordan because Hal isn't afraid of him. Rather than admit that not seeing eye to eye with Hal is maybe a two-way street, Batman just doubles down. He really does not like Green Lanterns telling him how it is. I mean, I get it in terms of Hal and Guy's case, but John? Really? You're gonna let a feud form there too just cause of the other Green Lanterns? Ugh, yipes. Why can't Batman just get along with at least one Green Lantern? Just one. Number 6. Wally West and Kyle Rayner. These two heroes are both ones that adopted mantles. Wally West became the Flash after Barry Allen, and Kyle Rayner replaced Hal Jordan's Green Lantern. The pair consistently mock one another and often try to debase each other, criticizing one another left, right, and center. This feud started as soon as the two pretty much met, and stems from the fact that they simply think the other is just not good enough to replace the former hero who wore the costume previously. Which is interesting because almost everyone else thinks that they both do a good job. Rather than just accept that they are both doing their best and both good in different ways, they choose to bicker and compete at every opportunity they get. Like little kids, these two. Number 5. Bishop and Gambit. This duo have also butt heads ever since they first met. Bishop comes from a future where the X-Men have perished after being betrayed by one of their own, and mutants were put into concentration camps. I said that like I didn't know I wrote it, but I just felt like it sounded harsh. He met a man called the Witness who refused to give his name and claimed to know the story of the X-Men, saying that he was the last one to see them alive. He also went by LeBeau, and it was his similarity to Gambit that instantly made Bishop hate and not trust him. While I understand Bishop's reaction, he just continued to not trust Gambit for pretty much forever. Even when the two are forced to work together, he continued to insult and berate Gambit, often putting both of them at risk due to ignoring Gambit's suggestions while on missions, just because they came from him. I also really don't think that the Witness was the traitor. This is a silly grudge because it is based on so many assumptions. Number 4. Reed and Namor. Cyclops and Wolverine may be fighting over Jean, but it is this fight over a paramour that really takes the cake. Oftentimes when I bring up Namor, I put him in either category, villain or superhero. In truth, he's really an anti-hero, but he has a few times been an interesting nemesis to the Fantastic Four, or at the very least, Reed Richards. Namor is head over heels in love with Susan Storm, which has put the two at odds, with Richards often presented as Sue's savior, and Namor the awful brute from the sea, who is coming to carry her away. But not always. Sometimes Susan seems to actually want to be with Namor, and with a neglectful husband like Reed Richards, I can't really say that I blame her. Namor and Susan have shared a few kisses and long romantic looks, but in the end she always comes back to Reed. Number 3. Superman and the Flash. For some reason, Superman has this crazy obsession with beating the Flash at his own thing, being fast. Well, you may think I'm exaggerating here. I mean, there have been a few times where Superman actually just wanted to catch Flash because he was being mind controlled, or, was going to run to his death, or needed some sense talked into him. I can guarantee you that there are many, many panels and instances that point to the fact that Superman just really wants to be faster. He has also had countless foot races with countless flashes, and almost every time he's either tied or lost, with more losses than ties. Yet even though they have been racing since the 60s, in 2011, Superman is chasing Barry Allen's Flash in Superman issue 709, and is still seen wondering to himself in a panel, which of them is faster? Give it up, Superman, it's not you. Quit trying to take this one thing away from the Flash. You have a million other things you're superior at. Jeez. Number 2. Hawkeye and Winter Soldier. Are you surprised by this one? I know I am. Hawkeye and Winter Soldier have something in common, beyond both being superheroes. Super, in Hawkeye's case. They are both exes of Natasha Romanoff, aka Black Widow. The two are pulled together in the Tales of Suspense, Hawkeye and the Winter Soldier series to track down whoever is killing Natasha's old enemies, following Black Widow's death. It is clear from the way they interact they do not want to be working together, that they do not trust each other, and that they actually hate each other. While I get it that trying to get along with your ex's ex is probably pretty weird, what I do not get is that they later reveal that they have kind of always hated one another, which means this feud predates their time dating Natasha? What? But why? So this rivalry is kind of based around them sharing an ex, but also just based around, I guess, them both existing. Number 1. Wolverine and Deadpool. These two have a long-standing rivalry for almost no reason. They often fight just to fight. At one point in the comics, Deadpool fights Wolverine because a doctor prescribed him to fight a superhero to help fix his hallucinations. Another brutal fight they have ends with Wolverine offering to buy Deadpool a beer. Mostly, these two fight just because they can. They both have insane regeneration factors, which means they can usually take the fight as far as they want and make it as violent as they desire, and still both be fine. It is a really strange relationship. Of course, Deadpool does take it far enough to kill Wolverine when he brings a carbon-atium sword to take him on when he kills the entire Marvelverse. But don't worry, that death is not part of the main continuity. Wolverine is fine. Beyond this, there is also the hilarious rivalry that translated weirdly to the X-Men Wolverine Origins film, and beyond that, the Deadpool movies, where Deadpool just enjoys poking fun at Logan. I suspect the two might actually secretly be BFFs. Number 10. Sonic Flight. Even with Sean Cassidy's accepted superhuman vocal stamina, this ability appears to be an odd one that doesn't really make a ton of sense. Banshee can produce a sonic scream, which he can use as a form of sonar, to injure those he fights with in battle and to shield himself or others, or disorient his enemies. Sure, that makes sense. But he also uses his sonic scream to fly, which would make sense if he were just using the ability to, say, you know, fly up to the second story of a building. But he has used this ability to fly longer distances as well, like over the ocean and stuff. However, in order to remain altitude and stay in the air, he has to keep screaming. So wait, how does he breathe? Well, we know he has enhanced vocal stamina, but this still doesn't really explain long trips. The answer is that he uses a winged gliding suit that allows him the time he needs to apparently breathe. However, without his winged gliding suit, his sonic flight powers would be pretty much useless. So yeah, kind of a weird ability. Number 9. Tentacles. Tentacles. Not to say that tentacles are inherently bad, by the way, they aren't, but what they are is kinda random, especially in this case. The tentacles I wanted to talk about here were Callisto's random tentacles. Callisto never really had tentacles until the early 2000s, but where did they come from? After all, she was introduced in the 1980s without them, and they just kinda seemed to appear one day. Mask was to blame for this alteration to Callisto's look, though she still had her famous eye patch at the time. She's never lost that, by the way. Mask gave Callisto tentacles to torment her. After he was defeated once more, she decided to actually keep them instead of be changed back. Not because they were useful, but because she refused to bargain with Mask anymore, so she just decided to accept them. She was like, I'm cool with these tentacles. The super weird thing is, although they were not a mutation of her own, they still disappeared along with her powers during the events of M-Day. Huh? Number 8. Superpower Manipulation. This is one that people can't seem to wrap their heads around because, well, it's just too overpowered, and why Hope Summers isn't utilized in the comics as often as someone of her power level could be, or maybe should be depending on your opinion. Superpower Manipulation is a weird one because it basically isn't a power that has any inherent weaknesses attached to it. You can do whatever you need to with that power. The possibilities are pretty much endless. In giving Hope this power, they created something virtually undefeatable, but when we read comics, the struggle is what we usually most most enjoy exploring and reading about. So from a writer and storyteller context, this makes Hope's power a hard one to feature and use in comics, which is why you might notice stories that involve her don't usually focus on her insane power set. Number 7. Unlimited magics. I feel like people often forget that Illyana Rasputin's real mutant power is teleportation. She's a teleporter. And yet we all get more wrapped up in her magical abilities, her soul sword. Magik actually only has such powerful magical abilities because she was kidnapped by Belasco when she was very little, which is pretty weird. Just because she was tied to Limbo through her teleportation powers, where Limbo is basically a stepping stone for her while teleporting, she now just has unlimited magical power? Huh? Also, that whole story of Belasco kidnapping young Illyana, basically torturing her, and yet admiring and cherishing her as his protege all at the same time is just pretty odd and nonsensical to begin with. Number 6. Flaming prehensile tongue. Toad has all sorts of odd abilities, but one of the most bizarre and odd by far is his prehensile tongue. Now, I know what you might be thinking, but Amanda, he's Toad. Sticky prehensile tongue should make sense for any amphibian-based mutants. But what about when we decide to make it flaming? Yeah, I know, right? That's weird. That was an update that Toad's tongue saw in the comics. Why? I guess because it looks cool. But his tongue was already not a super useful power to have, and adding flames, it doesn't really make it any more useful. It does make it look cooler though, I guess.
Do you know what happens to a toad when it's struck by lightning? The same thing happens to everything else.
Number 5. Eggs. There's a few occurrences of this with mutants. Angel Salvador has this ability due to her insect physiology. It doesn't really do much as a power for her, it's just part of the way that she reproduces. Though it is pretty creepy and a little gross. But then again, so is most stuff involving the creation of new life, am I right? One of the other now remarkably famous mutants who have had this weird ability? Goldballs, who now actually goes by the name Egg. He actually changed his code name due to the revelation regarding his powers. Originally, we just thought Goldballs emitted gold bouncy balls out of his body, which seemed pretty odd and well, kinda useless. But then we realized in the events of Dawn of X that these gold balls were actually infertile eggs, which is also kinda useless. Unless, that is, you have the other 4 insanely powerful members of the mutant group known as the Five around you. When matched up with Elixir, Tempest, Hope Summers, and Proteus, Egg's abilities revealed themselves as being mighty useful, as together the 5 can combine their power sets in order to resurrect any of their fallen comrades. Still weird, but also kinda now amazing? Number 4. Aviation. The power of aviation through non-telekinetic means, that is. Most mutants that can naturally fly usually have this power as a result of a physical mutation. Some are simply granted wings, like Angel or Pixie, who otherwise find themselves looking like a standard human exteriorly, but some find themselves with a full-on bird-like mutation, like Beak. Beak's aviation mutation, depending on the artist, can leave him looking pretty all-out freaky. He's either drawn like a full-on bird person, or sometimes like a hybrid bird-human. His aviation mutation barely even gives him flight abilities as well. He isn't great at flying, but he can manage to do it for very short distances if he really tries. So why does he look like a bird then? It's not really useful. Number 3. Hollow bones. Speaking of flight-related mutations, one common trait that you'll see presented as a power or a perk is hollow bones. Angel and Beak both have hollow bones. What it's supposed to help with in regards to those mutants is help them accomplish the ability to fly. And I mean, usually it does by making them significantly lighter, but also hollow bones sound like something terrible to have in the midst of a battle. Somehow Angel has been presented as being very durable, despite the fact that his hollow bones have to exist in order for his flight powers to work and make sense. But if his bones are hollow, then shouldn't punches from foes with super strength cripple the poor original X-Men team member? Like what?
My only regret is that I have bonitis.
Number 2. Become ice cream. So far we've only seen this very specific mutant power once, and only in one single issue, and not even an issue of X-Men either, but instead Obnoxio, the clown's own series. One issue series. The mutant who possessed this ability? Ice Cream. Yeah, I'm not kidding. I know, a very original name. Ice Cream. Ice-Scream used his abilities to infiltrate the X-Mansion, planning to put an end to the super team because their abilities made him feel ridiculous by comparison. I mean, I don't blame him. How he expected to accomplish this, however, with his power set being so useless, well, I have no idea. Number 1. Love Eyes. In all new Dupe, we gotta learn even more about Dupe's capabilities. Well, we don't really know what Dupe is still exactly. He has been a member of the X-Men, and hasn't been confirmed either way in regards to his mutant status, or, well, any other status for that matter. We don't know if he's an alien, or if he was made in a lab, or what's really going on with him. None of it's really fully been confirmed. What we do know is that he has a slew of insanely powerful and ridiculously cartoonish abilities. One such ability is Love Eyes, which seems to have no real specific purpose. Kitty Pryde suspected that he was using his love eyes to try and enchant her, casting a love spell on her, but Dupe claimed that they're just how he shows affection. Ineffective love spell or just a weird quirk. Either way, they're pretty irrational. Number 10. Null. While Null is more of the creator or father of all symbiotes, he's also kind of like the original symbiote in a way. As such, he has control over all symbiotes, sort of like his children, and he can manipulate them to do whatever he wants. Which, sure, Null is all-powerful, but also still a pretty weird bit of history that we discovered as we learned more and more about the bizarre and gloriously strange story of Clintar. His abilities include allowing him to turn all of his symbiotes, all of Clintar, into a space dragon. Yep. Don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining, just acknowledging how amazingly spacey and strange he is. He also managed to use his symbiotes to merge with the Silver Surfer for a brief moment, likely plotting to use the Silver Surfer as his very own symbiote herald. Oh man, Null definitely needs some symbiote heralds. That is a story I would read the heck out of. Number 9. Agony. Agony is the forced offspring of Venom, who was also modified by the Life Foundation. While Venom has been known to have somewhat acidic powers, Agony took this ability one bizarre step further, possessing the ability to spit acid harmful enough to actually melt human flesh. But it doesn't stop there. Agony also possesses the weird and unique ability to absorb substances and then reuse them itself, like Spider-Man's webbing. Number 8. Magic Venom. This whole thing doesn't make a ton of sense to me, to be honest, though the abilities, I guess, can be explained away by being connected to magic? During the War of the Realms, Eddie Brock got to create his own version of Venom when he was gifted a Dreamstone by a dark elf witch. After he accepted it, the witch revealed that Eddie would now have to serve and fight for her ruler Malekith. Haha, gotcha. But of course, Eddie didn't want to, so instead, he chomped off one of her arms. That whole interaction was pretty weird, because, I mean, obviously, he's just gonna bite off one of your arms. What do you think was gonna happen, witch? And Eddie then used the Dreamstone, which can make your dreams come true, to create a new version of a magic Venom suit, which was also pretty strange. This version of Venom came with no voice of its own, but for some reason seemed to amplify Eddie's negative emotions. As such, Eddie decided to split up the magical symbiote, having the power to do so, transforming it into Asgardian armor for the civilians that he saved. Already a pretty weird ability. He could also control weather with the symbiote, because I guess dreams and magic? Number 7. Lasher. What's weird about this one is Lasher actually exhibits a less refined version of a power that the Venom symbiote attempted to exert earlier on. Okay, so I'm not going to lie, this one is just as interesting as it is strange in terms of symbiote history, which is kind of why I selfishly wanted to share with you guys on this list. But it is additionally and also fairly outlandish and odd power, so it also belongs here as well. Lasher is a forced offspring of Venom, whose creation was manipulated by the government and the Life Foundation. Lasher's weird power as a result of that is that it can bond with two hosts, though one host needs to be less sentient or non-sentient in order for it to work. This is interesting because it is originally a power that Venom attempted to flex when it sought to bond with both Peter Parker and Eddie Brock at the same time. A symbiote threesome of sorts, you might say. However, it didn't work and caused Venom to pass out from exhaustion just for trying it. The other weird thing about this enhanced ability for Lasher is, out of all of the things the government could work to improve, this seems like kind of a weird one to pick. All it grants the symbiote is additional control over a war dog ultimately, which is cool, but it doesn't seem like a huge advantage in comparison to, say, trying to cure one of its natural weaknesses, which would be better. Like, now it's not weak to fire or something like that. Number 6. Scorn. Gorn is the offspring of Carnage and Tanis Knives' prosthetic arm, because apparently that's a thing that can happen. As such, it has unique technological abilities, being part tech, part symbiote. It can fuse and interact with tech and seems to have a level of immunity when it comes to the usual sonic weaknesses that most symbiotes suffer from. What a weird symbiote, though. A weird origin. Number 5, Toxin. As its name implies, Toxin has the unique power of toxic fangs. While Venom itself seems to sometimes be able to produce acid, these toxic fangs and the toxic bite that it comes with seem to be a power that doesn't really come much from anywhere specific that makes sense. Symbiotes obviously possess their own power set due to their unique physiology, but when we were originally introduced to symbiotes, it was implied that unique abilities were actually cloned from those that they had bonded with previously, making Toxin's bite kind of an odd one, because where does it come from? But then again, many of the other symbiotes have also appeared to have unique abilities, so maybe this is just a thing and we just learned about it later, and so symbiotes can be born with, or I guess develop, unique abilities just all on their own? And you might be thinking, like, maybe it does come from one of Toxin's parents, or Toxin's parent symbiote, but his parent symbiote was Carnage, so I don't know. What is that? Number 4, Carnage. Speaking of Carnage, I mean, the longer a character's history, the greater the chance that things might get pretty out there for the character. Like when Carnage and Venom randomly displayed the ability to travel through the internet in the 90s. But one of the other crazier abilities we've seen is the ability for Carnage to control another person's mind. And I'm not just talking about the usual back and forth bonding here between symbiote and host, though I feel like Cletus and a symbiote, when we're talking about Carnage, are really a combo team. No one is really vying for control. The decisions they actually make together, and those decisions are both equal parts theirs. Whereas Venom has always said, "We are Venom," implying some independence between Brock and his symbiote, Carnage always refers to itself as one single entity, fully merged. I am Carnage. What I'm talking about here is what we've seen with Carnage both in Volume 1 and later in Volume 2, when it recovered these powers, exhibiting the ability to control or influence others' minds. It almost completely took control of Stark's mind and suit in Carnage Volume 1, Issue 5, which we've seen other symbiotes do this, but it's not a power you see very often. Where does it come from? Why does it exist? This comes from Null. Number 3, Sleeper. Another symbiote that possesses unusual chemical-related powers is Sleeper. Sleeper is another offspring of Venom. It was left in the care of Alchemax by its parent, Venom, and their partner, Eddie Brock, who helped in a way to give birth to Sleeper, I guess you could say, making Eddie Brock, I guess, kinda like a parent to Sleeper too, although not genetically speaking per se. Even Alchemax was surprised when Sleeper seemed to develop all its own, a power of chemokinesis. It can create and secrete chemicals for a variety of purposes. It can use this ability to propel itself through space, manipulate the emotions of others, cloak its scent, control minds, and even to neutralize and attack enemies. Number 2, Anti-Venom. This is a pretty strange symbiote, even in just how it came to be. Anti-Venom is a symbiote that was created when Martin Lee, aka Mr. Negative, used his powers to cure Eddie Brock's cancer. But for some reason, his power bonded with the remnants of Venom that still lingered within Brock and created a new symbiote known as Anti-Venom. Being that this symbiote was created in such an odd way, some unique abilities made sense. It had been created after bonding with Eddie's white blood cells, so of course it had immense healing and cleansing powers. But it also for some reason had immunity to the usual weaknesses of a symbiote. It was immune to fire and sonic attacks for some reason, and this was never really fully explained, and just chalked up to it being an extremely different kind of symbiote. So there's still a lot that I feel like we didn't really figure out about Anti-Venom before it went poof, bye. Number 1, Venom. Venom has displayed countless abilities over the years and has changed as time has changed along with it. It has been revealed to be able to merge with inorganic material, giving us briefly a Venommobile for a bit when it was also bonded with a host at the same time. The Venom symbiote actually can seemingly bond to anything, including a dinosaur in the Old Man Logan universe. It's learned how to grow wings, has immunity to Ghost Rider's penance stare for some reason, maybe because it was once bonded with Ghost Rider, has access to a pocket dimension, can camouflage itself, and can travel through telephone lines and also travel through the internet. But one of the strangest powers was revealed during the time it spent with Flash Thompson as Agent Venom in outer space during the Space Knight series. At that point, it was revealed that after being cleansed, well, partially cleansed really, as it would later turn out, it could hear the voice of the universe, which gave it kind of like a galactic SOS radar, allowing Venom to sense when planets were in danger. Yeah, entire planets. Probably one of the most out there powers that we have seen it display. Spacey powers are always so weird and out there.